Don't stop.
Hi, thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything in a Bit Gay podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randalls Friedman. My guest today is someone that I was very interested in talking with because she has written a book and she has started posting videos on TikTok. And I started listening and watching her story, and she was part of a cult. And I've had cult members on my show before and talked about their lives and their survival. But I really, really enjoy speaking with Tamara, and she has a really great story. She's living her authentic life now. She's a survivor, and I love how open she's being with it and talking about what she went through and what a person that's in a cult actually goes through. And as I was talking with her, and I've done this with other guests, you look back and you think about, or you kind of reflect and you think, how lucky am I that I have such freedom and that I haven't had to live a decade or more. I think she was 14 years of her life was dedicated to this cult, and she wasn't able to kind of live her authentic self, and had to deal with, family being in the cult and kind of going out and leaving the cult and then trying to like figure her way in the real world. And I just find it so fascinating, first, how people get brought into the cults, but they end up staying. And then imagine like you're in this world that nobody else knows about except for the people that are in the cult. And then you're kind of segregated from everyone else. And then you are taken out whenever you decide to leave or you escape or you realize that you're in a cult. And you get out to the real world, then you got to like adjust your whole life. So if you've been in there for a decade or more, or 14 years, or some people I've talked to have been there for 20 years and grew up in a cult, and they weren't even like brought into it the way that Tamara was. But just think about how you would have to adjust. It's like, think about it like this. This is how I was thinking about it. Like, think about like you're picked up in your life and you're moved to, let's say, the Amazon rainforest. And that's extreme, but like you're moved there and it's a completely different way of life. That's what I kind of think about whenever I think about you're leaving a cult, because you are confined in this cult. You're in some ways taken care of, and the way that they say they take care of people, and you are part of this world, this bubble that you're in. And then whenever you leave and you're in the real world, you're like, oh my God, like it's so different. And you have to adjust and you have to learn how to live in the real world. And I think that takes such courage. And it really shows somebody that is a survivor, shows how resilient they are. And she had kids that she had to bring through this journey with her, that had to adjust to being in the real world and not being part of this cult. And her husband also, had to agree to this finally, that he wanted to leave. And the whole story is just really remarkable. And I'm so glad I got to meet her and also interview her and help her tell her story on my podcast. So hope you enjoy this story with Tamara Matthews. Thanks. Hi, thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything in a Bit Gay podcast. Today I have a guest. Her name is Tamara Matthew, and she is an author. I think she has a very interesting and amazing story. I found her on TikTok doing videos talking about she was in a cult for 14 years. So welcome to the show, Tamara.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So tell me what the name of the cult was and how you got involved in it.
The name of the cult is called the 12 Tribes. I was first introduced to this group through my husband's family. This group had a big presence in Island Pond, Vermont in the early 80s, and my husband's aunt joined this group back in 1981.
Okay.
So he grew up always knowing about this group. His cousins lived there for a time. his family would visit from time to time when he was a child. He just thought that it was just some, different kind of church that his relatives lived at.
Yeah.
And so I met him in college. I was 18 when I met my husband, and I didn't know anything about this group until about 3 years after my husband and I had started dating. We unexpectedly were pregnant. And so, and just so happened that his cousin who lived in the 12 Tribes community recently got married, and they were also expecting their first child. We went over to my husband's house, and his relatives had come up. They were all living in the Hyannis, Massachusetts location of the 12 Tribes, and that was like my first time like meeting people from this group. And I was intrigued. They seemed really different. I could tell, how different they were, but it wasn't like in a bad way. It really caught my interest. I was so curious, like, what do you mean they all live together? And I like peppered him with questions. He was just kind of like, yeah, they do. They all live together in households. I don't really know. So it didn't really, I had my baby, and then our wedding was coming up. So we got married 3 months after I gave birth to our son. And so, of course, we invited his relatives who lived in the 12 tribes, not knowing at that time that they do not attend the actual ceremony. Like, they do not go into a church and attend the actual ceremony. I can get into more of the why of that later if you want. I do describe that in my book. So they ended up being at our reception, and they always kind of traveled around, in groups of people. So it wasn't only the relatives who were at our reception, but there were other members from the Hyannis community. Like, they'd all come up together, and they were just like serving at my reception. They were like cleaning tables and setting out food and getting people drinks and taking out garbage. And, like, I didn't know who these people were. And, my friends and family are like, who's catering your wedding? Like, I don't know. I think that they're like my husband's relatives and their friends, they're part of this group. But I was definitely like, oh, wow, it was a hot day. And they even stayed and they cleaned up our whole reception hall, like, afterwards. It was the 12 tribes people that just like did everything. And we never asked them. We didn't expect that. So I was really, just like, wow, who does that? They don't even know me. So then the next day there was just kind of like this 12 tribes reunion at my in-laws' house, because there's a group in Rutland. And so, because all these people were up from the Hyannis community, all these other people wanted to see them. So there was like probably like a dozen or more 12 tribes people over at my in-laws' house. So all day long, I just talked with different people and took walks, and I met other young mothers, and I was like envious. I'm like, wow, these people, like, they have like this cool, different lifestyle together. And I so badly wanted to go and see what, like, what it was like in the community. And from then on, my interest was just super high. I ended up visiting Hyannis for a week with my in-laws. I got my husband to start going down to Rutland for their Friday night celebrations. Like, I just became more and more enamored with this.
And was your husband, was he into it as well?
Not at first. I mean, he was like fine with the idea of going there. It's nice people. We always had a good time, good conversations, but at the time we were doing really well for ourselves. He had graduated college, and we'd already bought a house in Burlington, Vermont. And like, wow. I was able to stay home with my child, and we were only 23 years old. So we were doing really well as far as that,
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So he was not, as into going as I was. I was just looking at it long term, like look at this amazing lifestyle. That's really what I was drawn to at first. It wasn't at all the religious beliefs. I wasn't like, yay, we found this people who follow Jesus. I wasn't in that realm at all. It was more in the realm of, maybe God has shown this to me, because I did believe in God. And I really wanted a wholesome, life for my child.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted safety. It was 1999. Technology hadn't even got to the place that it was now, but I just, even back then, I'm thinking, I don't just want to raise my child to want to be playing video games all day. And
I felt like a community. Is that what it kind of felt like to you? Like you had like people like you belonged to this community if you would have went.
yeah, and it was so almost like a modern day Little House on the Prairie. They drove
Yeah.
cars and they had electricity, but it was also very simple. There wasn't TV, there wasn't video games. Their kids didn't have all these belongings, and so when you visited, it was like stepping back in time, and the way the children was just amazing to me. They were respectful and obedient, and they were always interested in outsiders, and just the way that a 10-year-old could have a conversation with you, you were like, wow, there's really something special here. This is how I want my child to be, when he's 10 years old. And the children were hard workers, and the girls helped their moms in the kitchen, and the boys were helping their dads on vehicles or, with animals at the farm. It just seemed so idealistic, just that kind of lifestyle, having people around, just the camaraderie. I was so just wow, can't believe that this lifestyle even exists in this day and age. And everybody seemed so happy, and they all genuinely cared for each other. So I was hooked.
You were, and so what did you do to convince your husband though that you wanted to be a part of this?
We just had constant conversations about it, and I would get literature from the community. They have these intertribal newses that are only supposed to be when you're in there, it's like the newsletter. But because my mother-in-law was so connected to the group in Rutland, they would give that to her, and then she'd pass them on to me, and they'd give me other free. So I was constantly reading all this stuff and emailing people. And then I got him to visit. We went to some weddings. We, he came and spent a week with me in Hyannis, getting to know people and helping out. And it just, I guess I wore him down over time. If he knew that this is what I really wanted.
And what's kind of their values though? Are they religious? So what's the religion that they follow, or is there anything different from just believing in God with this tribe, for the 12 tribes?
So I would, they don't call themselves Christians because they believe that they have separated themselves from any mainstream religion, and they're the ones that are establishing the one true church on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
But the way they live is really fundamentalist Christian. And then they throw a little bit of Judaism in there as well, because they celebrate Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah and Pesach and the traditional Jewish festivals. They also celebrate. So it's they feel like they're the true representation of Israel. When Jesus was alive, he was called Yahshua, so that's how they refer to Jesus. These are the festivals that were celebrated back then. It's they really follow the Old Testament really closely, but also the New. It's a.
So are they kind of Jewish people for Jesus in a way?
Yeah, I would not describe them like that. They really are unique, and one of the ways that they described themselves in a good way was peculiar. We heard that a lot. We're a peculiar people.
Okay.
But the way that they lived, they really felt like they were bringing about the one true church on earth, and they were going to fulfill the prophecy in Revelation about they were going to run this 49-year race. During that time, they're raising up what's called the male child, which will eventually be 144,000 male virgins between the ages of 18 and 24, that at the end of times, which they feel is going to be around the year 2070, this 144,000 is going to go out in the world, and try to give the people of the world like one last beacon of hope, one last chance to give up their depraved life in the world and join God's people. But the world is going to be so depraved by then, men will be so evil that they're actually going to murder these people in the streets. And it's when the last two of this male child is slaughtered in the streets, that's when Jesus, Yahshua, is going to return and claim his bride, who are the 12 tribes.
I see. Okay.
And the 12 tribes, it's like 12 geographical locations all over the world. So the original 12 tribes of Israel was just like the country of Israel and like 12 places within Israel. Yeah. But their vision, it's 12 tribes globally around the earth. So from there, they're hoping to spread and get to those numbers where they can come up with that male child. It sounds so weird.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's a cult. So yeah, I mean, it's not, it's different, So what was the living situation like? Because you said that everybody kind of lived together. So kind of explain what, like, were you in one house with multiple families and people?
Exactly. Yes.
How many people were in a typical house?
That depended on the size of the house.
Okay.
So the first house that we moved into was in Hyannis, Massachusetts.
But that's on Cape Cod, Hyannis?
Yeah. Hyannis. Yeah.
That's a great town, actually.
Yeah. And like their houses were like, where they live now is 14 Main Street. They're like on Main Street.
Wow.
Like these groups are not like off in the woods or up in a mountain or, a lot of their locations are right on main streets in town.
I never would have thought that. I would have thought that they would have been in the woods, hidden away in a compound.
No. They run cafes and businesses, and there are some locations that maybe are a little more remote, but not purposefully. Like they never purposefully sought to be reclusive. They actually want to have a presence like within towns because they're very much into recruiting. It's not like the Amish, Amish don't like recruit, they're there. And if people want to join them, they, I guess you can, but the 12 tribes are very different in that way. Like we wanted this presence in the towns that we were in. That's why they opened cafes, like in college towns, such as Ithaca, things like that, because they want to be constantly meeting people and having people join.
Interesting.
So we lived in these houses right in the middle of town.
And how many people were like in your house, your first house? And did you have your own bedroom or did you have to share it?
No, like families never shared a bedroom. I mean, maybe I have heard things about like the early days, but by the time that we came, there were no families were sharing bedrooms. So when we first moved in, we had one bedroom. It was us and our 17-month-old. Okay. And so we had one bedroom. By the time I had my third child was the first time that we ever got a second bedroom. And from then on, we always had at least two bedrooms. When we left the community, because, my oldest, I had a boy and then I had a girl. So by the time they were like 14 and 12, like we don't really want boys and girls like sharing a room at that age. Yeah. And I had two sons and two daughters. So by the time we left, we typically at that point had three bedrooms, so that our girls and boys could be separated. But it just depended on what size household you lived in. I described this in my book. Sometimes we were so packed out. Sometimes there'd be a family living in a tent or a shed or a camper or a basement or an attic, or like we just made use of every available living situation. When my older daughter was 12 years old, for a summer, she lived in a tent in the yard with a single woman who was maybe in her early 20s. And then there was this program called WWOOFER, WWOOFER, Willing Workers on Organic Farms. And we would get volunteers from all over the country who had signed up on this program because we were an organic farm. Mm-hmm. We often had young people from China and South America and Europe and all over staying with us for certain lengths of time, and they would help out and learn about the farm and everything. And so my 12-year-old daughter lived in a tent with a woofer from, I believe that she was from either Switzerland or Austria. And then, like I said, a single woman in the community. And that was just like a normal thing, that my daughter lived in a tent in the yard. Like this, we didn't have room in the house. So-
And did they were they homeschooled or were they sent to
yes.
they were,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. But like we had our own homeschool. So I didn't necessarily teach my children,
Mhm.
but we had groups and we had a little schoolhouse up on top of the hill behind the barn. And it was just like, every morning that they went up to their groups, normal school hours.
And what about the house that you and your husband bought whenever you first, after you had your child? Like, where did that house go? Did you sell it and have to give the money to them or anything? Or were you keeping your finances separate?
Well, we sold it, and we did make a profit on it. And my husband had used that some of the proceeds to pay down some of his college loans, or
Okay.
maybe some other bills that we had. It wasn't like huge profit, but
Yeah. But but was your husband going to a real job every day or was he just having to work in the community? Like
oh well, yeah. After you join, you're there. Like
you
you
don't
don't
work
go to
anymore?
no, you work within the group.
Okay. And so how's the group making money? Like these
So
cafes and stuff like you were
yeah,
talking about?
yeah,
Okay.
they had a the cafe. The cafes don't pull in huge profits, but then most communities will have like another way to make income. So in Hyannis at that time, there was the Forest Keepers Tree Crew. So there was a group of men that went out on this tree crew every day, and then there was like an odd jobs crew. So at the time, my husband got put on the odd jobs crew, and they were painting like some florist in Hyannis. So he'd
Okay.
go like every day to paint this floral shop. So, they're doing outside work for other people in society. It's not so insular that just like everything was happening only,
Yeah.
within the community.
And what did you have to wear for clothing? Like what was there a certain dress that you had to wear?
Yeah. So for women, very, very modest. The pants that we wore were really blousy. People like call them hammer pants or harem pants or
Yeah.
Judy pants. And they were
Yeah.
just like really blousy and then gathered. We called them Seuss pants. Seuss coming from a name in France where I guess they first started wearing these pants because they have a group over in France. So yeah, the women would wear those types of pants or really long and full skirts. And then like our tops had to be very modest, like
Yeah.
high neckline, sleeves. When I first joined, the sleeve length could not as short as what I have on now, but it could be a little bit shorter. But by the time I
Yeah.
left, all of our sleeves had to be like down to our elbow. Like clothing standards just changed and evolved and got more strict and more drab. Where like, bright colors weren't allowed and certain patterns weren't allowed. And one time we had to dye all of our clothes either brown or navy blue or dark purple, just so that there were no bright, flashy colors or really contrasting patterns. But, those kind of things evolved. When I first joined, it was not like as strict like that. But we only wore natural fibers, so like no polyester or things like that. We only wore cotton and rayon, wool, linen, those types of materials.
Yeah.
So, for the women, most of our clothes were sewn ourselves. And so we had all these patterns. Like you couldn't just wear a t-shirt. You'd have to have like a tunic or like a vest thing over it.
And how were the children treated?
If they behaved, they were treated great.
But were other people in this cult, or were they disciplining your children as well? Because I've interviewed other people that have been in cults, and they said yes. Like this. I think at one of the cults there was like 80 people living in a house, and they separated their children from them, which I know is different than what you're talking about. But if their children misbehaved, they could have got disciplined by anybody that was in the house. Was that similar case to where you were living?
Well, it used to be like that. Like I said, like the 12 tribes changes a lot in their rules and standards. And
Yeah.
so I would hear stories like back in the 80s and 90s that literally anybody could just grab your child and spank them.
Really?
By the time we joined, it was never like that. I never experienced, if I'm around and my child did something, like nobody ever did that. But once you send your child to school, which we call training, So at the age of 6, once you're sending your child off to their training group, and whoever their teacher is has the authority to discipline them. So yeah, you'd be sending your child off to school knowing that they, if they misbehave or whatever, that their teacher could be disciplining them. Or if you ever, like we would send couples away, like for an anniversary or, things like that. Anytime somebody was covering your child, they automatically had authority to discipline them. You would never leave your child with somebody that you weren't comfortable with them disciplining them if they needed it.
And how were the kids happy then? Maybe because they didn't know anything else? Were they
Yeah.
they just thought this is how life was. Is that accurate?
Yeah, definitely.
And
especially in the younger years. As they get older to teenagers, no, not so much.
So when they started seeing other kids, outside of the group, if they went into town or something, into Hyannis or whatever, and they would see another 12-year-old, and they would see that they were dressed like a 12-year-old does in normal American society, would they ask questions about that? Like, why is that little girl wearing shorts? Why is that little girl wearing a tank top?
Mm-hmm.
Were they asked questions like that?
Yeah.
And it was just because you would tell them this is how we live, and is that kind of the explanation you would give them?
Yeah, there was a distinct separation between the world and us.
Okay.
So it was always like, well, that's how people in the world dress. They're immodest. God has shown us how to be, and so we're being obedient to what God tells us. And maybe someday these people are going to be as lucky as we are to be living in the truth. And you guys are so lucky to have been born here and to not have to go through all that these children in the world are going to have to go through. I think that's how we would talk to them.
And we'll be right back. Okay, and now back to the show. What was the moment in the 14 years that you realized something wasn't quite right?
People ask me that so much. It's like there was never one moment. If anything, that moment happened only 4 months after we joined. And I realized really quickly that it was not what I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never in my life lived apart from my natural family. And we moved down to Hyannis. We could have moved to Rutland to that group, but we chose to go to Hyannis. We'd gotten to know the most people down there. And, my family was not really supportive of what we were doing. And so we thought initially it would be in everybody's best interest that we would just go down to Hyannis and have that separation, to adjust and everything. So my husband and I were both baptized after about 7 weeks of living there.
Mm-hmm.
And I really started to be homesick, and the holidays were coming up, and I'd never not been with my family for holidays. I knew that they were all suffering, missing us, and, missing our child. He was the first grandchild on either side of the family. I have a lot of siblings that were all a lot younger than me. I just started missing everything. And so we were sent to Rutland around Thanksgiving time, to the community in Rutland, to visit people there. So I invited my mom to come see us. She'd never come to see us at that point. And she did, with my sister and brother, who were 7, 10 at the time. And then on the way home, I wanted to see other members of my family. We went to my aunt's house, and just being there, I just realized I did not want to go back. I did not want to go back to this house in Hyannis, and I just felt heavier and heavier the whole ride. And we got back, and I just went to bed, and I was pregnant again. By this point, I was pregnant again.
This is with the second child.
This is with my second child. Yeah. So I'm newly pregnant. Just, that's emotional in and of itself. So then the next day, I didn't want to get out of bed. I was so depressed. So my husband, found someone to take Emmett, and he had another man in the group, come into our bedroom to meet with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just a mess. I was just crying and crying. And,
You were probably hormonal too because you were
oh,
pregnant, right? Yeah.
definitely. But I just remember looking at them and saying, I just want to go home. Like, and the man that he was like one of the leaders in that group at the time, looked at me and said, "You are home." And then my husband said, "We're not going anywhere." And I was just like, that moment, it's like, what have I done? Like, I didn't dare. Like, I kind of felt kind of stupid in a way. It was me that got us there. I wanted so bad. I'd spent a year, convincing my husband to do this. We had given up our entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few months in, I'm like, okay, I don't like this now. I just felt like, what is wrong? What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I got through that and I endured another 14 years.
Yeah. I mean, and did your husband ever have that moment where he's just like, "Oh, wait, maybe this isn't for us either," during that 14 years?
Oh, it's difficult with him because he's just the kind of person that once he's doing something, he gives 150%.
Okay.
So it was like, it took him that year and a half to agree to go there. But then once he agreed, he was in.
Okay.
He was in, like we were there, and he rose up in the ranks really quickly because he's really good with people. He has a lot of, he's like jack of all trades kind of person. You know what I mean? Like he could install a toilet, or he could build a shed, or he could manage, he was a computer engineer before he moved into the community. So all the tech stuff, he could do that too. So there weren't many people like him in this group. So he was like so valuable and needed.
Mm-hmm.
And he just fit right in and like rose up. And I was just not like that.
So were you rebellious for the 13 and a half more years that you were there?
Not at all.
Okay.
I really was not that type of person. I did not like to have attention on me. I didn't want to be in trouble. I did learn to fly under the radar at a certain point.
Yep.
But I was very much a rule follower for a long time. I tried to do everything right. I really, once I realized, okay, this is my life. I do not have a choice. I really tried. I really tried to pray and read my Bible and talk to people. Not have a bad conscience about everything.
Yeah.
I really tried. I'm like, okay, I want to get this. I want this faith that other people have. Because I didn't say I had any other choice.
And so you had other women that were there. Were you ever, so did you have a best friend there? And then and if you did you and her ever talk about oh, I'm just not happy here? And did you kind of get that sympathy from anybody, or you kind of just kept it to yourself at that point?
I did kind of keep it to myself. There were people that I could express my struggle to, but at the same time, you just never knew when you talked to somebody that they weren't going to go and say to somebody, Tamara just told me her struggles and I'm really worried about her. And then the next thing you know, you're brought into a bigger meeting. That was always a risk of happening.
Okay.
So my husband's cousin, they were the ones that we met way back at my in-laws' house, and she was pregnant and I was pregnant. I speak about them in my book. So we only lived with them for a very short time, but we would always go visit their family every single year. Somehow we would manage to be sent down to, they usually, they lived in Hyannis for the most part, or they would come up to Cambridge. It's I really felt like she was my friend. But we didn't get into ever being like, hey, do you ever want to leave? It just wasn't like that. But she was somebody that I always felt like a companionship with, and I knew that I could trust. It's just when you live at one point in Cambridge, there were probably 80-something people.
Okay.
So there was a lot of different women, and you just knew who to say what to. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like,
It's kind of at work. When you're at work, you always have a friend that you can trust when you're complaining about something, it sounds like, and you know who you can trust.
exactly.
Got it. It makes sense to
You,
me.
or if you, I mean, there were products we weren't supposed to use. Like, if you liked a certain conditioner, you knew which woman who was going on shopping day that you could be like, hey, could you get me a panty?
Got it. Yeah.
And of somebody else, you would never,
Yeah.
so.
So, kind of fast forward to the 14 years, what made you say, I got to get out? And how did you do it?
So our children were getting older. It's hard for teenagers there. The rules are really strict.
Hmm.
They were getting to the point where two teenagers were not allowed to even be having a conversation together without an adult right there present. Like, not even like a short conversation where you
Why?
just, because they weren't going to be talking about anything uplifting.
I see. Okay.
They'd probably be like mocking single brothers or
Okay.
complaining about somebody or fantasizing about the world.
Got it.
So every interaction between children had to be covered. And we lived in this huge house. It was ridiculous. Like, I never wanted to leave my bedroom. Like one day my 15-year-old son was out in the gathering room playing his guitar, and another 15-year-old came out with his accordion, and they were just out there playing music. And that should be okay. Two 15-year-olds in a room, and they're both on their instruments. But no, you'd have someone come to you, hey, Emmett and Hanan are out in the gathering room. Nobody's covered them. And then, you had to go and correct them. My son said to me one time, didn't you have friends when you were my age? And like, that really cut me, because I realized like what an unnatural life I was expecting my 13 and 15-year-old to never seek out their friends, know? So what they did, like, children are going to find a way. They're going to find a way to have communication. And we lived in this huge mansion in Cambridge, and there were nooks and crannies all over this house. We lived in this community for 11 years. That's really rare. Most people move around a lot more, but, my two younger children never knew anything but this community. They knew every nook and cranny in that house. Those kids developed this whole system where they would leave notes for each other, like behind a certain radiator in a closet, or, behind a certain floral arrangement in the hallway. They had all these little places. And then they created this series of like little code words that if they were just walking by each other, that one of them could like make a noise or say a word that an adult would not like have a concern about if they overheard it. But that would let them know, like, hey, there's a note behind the third dryer in the basement. And they had this whole system. They told me about this after we left, where they would be able to like get little notes to each other, and because they weren't allowed to talk.
So it must have felt like prison to them in some ways, right? Because they were passing notes like prisoners do, it sounds like. And, like it's kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like there was a pond and we had a dock, and there was a slide out on the dock. And, we had swim lessons, and they had to pass certain tests, and they'd get a certain color bracelet so that you would know who was allowed to swim out, who was a strong enough swimmer. And we were safe in those ways. But there came a point where the dock, like, nobody could be out there, because it would always end up being like the young teenagers or teenagers that'd be out on the dock. Yeah. And if there wasn't a parent or somebody else out there, you couldn't really hear everything they were saying from sitting on the shore. So then it was like they weren't allowed to go out there. It's just like they couldn't go on a walk together. There had to be an adult. Like, there was no sense of like that friendship, children just being children at all.
And teenagers are moody and stuff, and they need time to themselves, So, I mean, I couldn't even...
Right, and they had to be given a will at all times. So they didn't chill, And there was like preparation hour before our gatherings, and they were like reading their Bible on their bed or something. Like, they didn't have that time. They were always having to have a will, working up at the farm or working in the soap shop. Or for girls, like my 12-year-old daughter could like practically make dinner by herself for 80 people. Like, they were just always always working, always doing something like that. There was never supposed to be dissipation.
And once you decided, okay, I'm out, I'm leaving. And did you tell your husband like we're leaving, or
Oh,
did it?
no.
Oh, so you
No,
left without your husband?
no. I waited for him to want to leave.
Okay,
I never would have dared. I had 4 children by that point.
okay.
And
And how did you convince him? Did it take like a year and a half to convince him the way it took a year and a half to convince him to come in?
No, it wasn't like that. There was a time where we went on this family night. So family night was like date night, like every other week. There was a schedule, and every couple got a family night where their children would be covered and they could like just have this evening together without their children. So we were on this family night, and it was the first time we'd ever started talking about like, what would we do if we left? Like, would we homeschool the children? Would we send them to school? You know, like what, you know, Audrey's wondering, you know, if he could get hired back at his old company. Like, we just had this conversation, and I started to feel like, oh, finally. But then it was like the next day, we just went about our lives like nothing happened. And during this time, like, we were doing other things. Like, my husband had a laptop. Like, you know, a few men had laptops, you know, and if he'd bring it home, like on family night, and like, we'd watch a movie on it.
So that wasn't allowed.
Oh my God, no. So we were starting to do these little things that we'd never done before. It was such a gradual, it was probably a year and a half from that time that we had that conversation to, like I told you about the woofers, the volunteers. So it was like early summer of 2014. We had 3 woofers from France. So I had taken French from like 7th grade all through high school, 2 semesters in college. Like, I really loved learning French, and I was so excited. We had these French woofers, and they were with us for a few weeks. And so I would have one of them like make lunch with me, and I would try to speak French with her, and they were trying to better their English. And so there was 2 women and 1 man. So one night they asked me if I wanted to like hang out with them after the gathering, and we would like have a little like French and English lesson. It was just me and these three people. And, you know, that's kind of like an unusual thing, you know, but somehow my husband agreed to keep all of our children and allow me to just like spend this time with these people. Mm-hmm. And we were just in the huge gathering room in our house, like, you know, and I had so much fun with these people. Like, we were laughing, and they were asking me English words for all these funny things. And I just had so much fun. That was like so rare. Like, there weren't times really where we were doing that with each other. Yeah. And so I was like, you know, in a really good mood. And we lived in a little house. So Cambridge has like a huge mansion. And then, you know, like just a little ways further down, there's like another smaller house. Mm-hmm. We lived in that smaller house. And then there was the big soap shop barn. And then there was the animal barn. Like, the property in Cambridge was enormous. So I went back home, and I was just like in a good mood. And I walked in, and do you know David Attenborough and like the Planet Earth videos? Yeah. So one thing that we kind of got away with letting our children do was watch these Planet Earth videos. Yeah. Like, my husband was able to download like the whole series, and I mean. And they didn't ever watch anything. So for them to sit and watch Planet Earth was like fascinating. You know, from my 6-year-old to my 15-year-old, they would just be glued. They loved those Planet Earth videos. So I got back, and my husband had all 4 of the children on our bed, you know, huddled over his laptop watching Planet Earth. And he asked if he could go talk to me in my boy's bedroom. And he shut the door, and he said, I called my brother Chris to find out if this company was hiring. So his brother Chris also went into software development. Okay. And actually, when we left to move into the community, his brother was still in college, but he'd already got him an internship at the company. And now, all these years later, like, Chris was kind of higher up in the company. And it totally caught me off guard. I was like, hiring for what? Like,
Yeah.
I was confused. And he's
Yeah.
like, for me, for a job. And I was like, but what did he say? He's like, yeah, he's got to talk to some people. And I was just like, I wasn't expecting it.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Okay, now back to the show.
So anyway, at this time, our lives had gotten a lot more complex because my in-laws had moved into the 12 tribes. They lived there with us in Cambridge.
Okay.
And my own maternal grandmother had moved in with us when my youngest was born. So I had my grandmother, who, like, I primarily, like, cared. I mean, everybody cared for her. We even sent her down to Florida. There's communities in Florida. We would send her down there for the winters because winters was getting hard for her up north. And so it wasn't like, it's not like we could just, like, grab our children and go. I was like, oh my God, what about Annie? Like, what about your parents? Like, so anyway, word got around pretty quick that our family was, like, on the edge and not doing well. So one of the things that the 12 tribes does when families are just in a bad place spiritually is to send them somewhere else. Because, that does a couple of things. It, like, removes you from the area where you're not doing good, and it gives you kind of like a fresh start, new people. Things always seem better in a new place, at least initially. So they didn't want us to just, like, fall out of there. So what they did, I remember a couple coming to me one afternoon and saying, we would like to send your family down to Arcadia, Florida. It's a really small community. It's just an older couple and another couple. That was the entire community. And they're having trouble making ends meet because their only source of income was this, like, 60-year-old man by himself trying to repair people's swimming pools in, like, the 95-degree heat. Like, this is June. This is middle of June. So, like, we really think your family, it would be a great change of pace. It's smaller, you guys can go down there and help out this family. And so we had never, like, a lot of people travel in the 12 tribes because, like I said, it's a global thing. Like, some of the families that we lived with, they had gone down to Brazil or out to California. We saw families, like, doing all this travel. Like, our family is not one of those families. So we'd only ever even gone camping a couple times with our children at this point. So, like, the thought of taking my family and, like, driving down to Florida was, like, this huge adventure, It just sounded so exciting. And so I even called my mom and I was like, hey, we're having the chance to take this big trip, like, would you want to, like, give us any money so that we can, like, do some fun things with our children on the way? And, like, my mom sent us money and we were able to camp. Like, we got a campsite for 3 nights near Assateague Island in Maryland and, like, got to go to the beach and see the wild horses.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And then my mom had a friend that lived in Rockwell, North Carolina, and there's a zoo there called Tiger World. And my mom, like, sponsored some tigers. She's like, you have to take the kids to Tiger World. So, like, we'd never done things like that. So, like, we went to this tiger zoo and then we camped out in North Carolina and we did visit communities on the way because there's 12 tribes in, like, Asheville, North Carolina, and Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Savannah, Georgia. So we were stopping, we would camp by ourselves, but then we would spend a night, like, in Savannah. We got to walk, we got to, see all these places. And we, like, drove through the Smoky Mountains and it was so much fun. Like, it was like the first time that we'd ever been together just as a family for, like, a week, just, like, traveling and doing all this fun stuff. And then
what was the kids' reactions? Were they just like, this is amazing, like, having a real life like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like, they were loving it. So then we got to Florida and we went to Arcadia and, like, there were only 5 people. We went from a community of, like, 70, 80 people to 5 people. plus our family. And we were given 2 cabins. Like, they had a big house, but then there were these 2 cabins, like, out back on the property. And that's where we were put, like, in these 2 cabins. Like, it was, for the first time, we weren't, like, in a house with so many other people. We kind of had our own space.
Mm-hmm.
Could kind of breathe a little. Like, every weekend, we took our kids, we took them to Sanibel, and we took them to Siesta Key. Like, every weekend, we'd, like, plan some beach trip. And cooking dinner for that amount of people was, like, cake. Like, so my children and I would, like, do all these, like, we'd bring back beach sand, and I'd go to these thrift stores and we'd get jars, and we would make these, like, sand things with shells and, like, decorate the tables for the household. And we were just doing all this fun stuff. We painted the rooms in our cabin, and my 6-year-old at the time was obsessed with all the lizards. Like, he would just spend the whole day, like, chasing those lizards around. And it was summertime and it was hot, and I thought that we were going to die, but I don't know. We just kind of acclimated. There was a pool. The community had, like, an above ground pool, and we never had anything like that at our disposal. So, like, they were, like, swimming all the time, and
it was like they were at camp in a way, right?
Yeah, I remember thinking, wow, like, I could just stay here forever. Like, this is great. But, the same things ended up, one of the couples that we had a lot of stuff happen within Cambridge ended up moving to Fort Myers. And before we knew it, like, they were there to have meetings with us because So one of the things that I bought with the money my mom sent me is I bought my girls bathing suits, like normal bathing suits.
Yep.
Because I was like, we're going to be in Florida going to the beach. I'm not going to make them wear, we wore, like, a lot of clothing for a swimsuit. It was like a full-on, like, elbow length shirt, high neck, and full-on, like, below your knee type. Like, so I bought them bathing suits, and it was, like, found out that I did that. And then I got them, like, these little, like, Greek yogurts, like, for a snack, and, like, they found out. And then we walked past some yard sale, and there was, like, a free thing of books, and I let my daughter take a Nancy Drew book, and somebody saw that. It's like all these things people started having meetings with us about again, and it's just, like, I was so sick of being scrutinized for... These aren't even, I started realizing, like, these aren't bad things. My son got in big trouble at Cambridge for reading Tom Sawyer. Like, it was a huge thing. And the person that gave him the book, an adult that gave him Tom Sawyer, was cut off. And it was just a huge ordeal. And I guess I should have learned my lesson because I don't let my daughter read Nancy Drew. But, like, I wanted my children to be able to have things that they enjoyed doing, and I really started to reconcile, like, I'm being corrected for nothing. People were coming to have meetings with me about my 9-year-old wearing a swimsuit in the pool and my 13-year-old reading Nancy Drew, and the fact that I got some Greek yogurts for a snack. Like, that had to be, like, a meeting where I had to sit there and, like, repent for these lawless behaviors. So I just got to the point, like, I did not want to sit through another meeting. And my husband got to that point. So there came a night when we were told that, once again, they wanted to have a meeting with us. I don't even know what it was for, because my husband said to me, we're not going. He's like, we're going to go back to our cabins and we're going to tell them that we're all sick and we're going to bed. So I was like, okay. Like, we'd never done, we'd, like, that was so rebellious. Was so, and the thing was, there weren't any bathrooms in our cabin, so we always had to go into the main house to, like, shower, go to the bathroom. Actually, no, there was an outdoor shower. We had an outdoor shower, but, like, there was no toilet. Yeah. So I remember sneaking in the house, like, just not wanting anybody to notice me because, we had said that we were sick, and I didn't want anyone to be like, oh, well, what can we get you? I remember just sneaking in quietly to go to the bathroom, and And then it was just a couple days later that my husband said, this is it. Like, let's figure out what we can do. Or he kind of set a date. Like, hey, we're going to leave on this day.
And did you tell them, or did you just pick up and leave?
No, we did not tell them. I made dinner the night before. Like, everything was normal. It was eggplant parmesan. And I made dinner. We ate dinner with everybody. And meanwhile, I knew that my family was out in those cabins packing our stuff. And we got up at like 4 a.m. and we left.
And did you ever hear from them?
From those specific people in Florida?
Or just anybody as in the 12 tribes?
Well, yeah, because my in-laws and my grandmother were still part of the 12 tribes.
I see. So they were still in Cambridge.
So, yeah, they were all in Cambridge still.
And are they still part of it?
No, my in-laws left a year and a half after we did.
Okay.
And my grandmother stayed, and she passed away in the 12 tribes in 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, she stayed, but they let her come visit us. They let her come stay at my house for a week at a time. I would still go to Cambridge and visit her, even though it was very awkward. But no, my grandmother chose to stay.
So you never were scared, though, after you left, that they were going to try to come after you?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
It's not that. They're not that kind of people.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Okay, and now back to the show. And tell me how your kids adapted to being in the real world. I mean, I guess Florida was kind of like it helped get them prepared. But once you left, did you go back to Vermont and your husband got the job working with his brother? Is that?
No. No, we had a very rough beginning. He had a hard time finding a job at first. So the first job that he found was like the night shift at a pharmaceutical plant up here, like putting prescriptions in boxes all night long, and then he was able to get a good job. See, he was running the Common Sense soap and body care industry in Cambridge for years before we left. So, and they did a lot of private label, which was a good thing because he got to know a lot of people on the outside in other businesses who he then had referrals. Then he got hired at a company up here called Autumn Heart, who did very similar work. The body care manufacturing. He knew all the lingo, all the equipment, all the everything. And then he had all these good references from these really reputable companies that the Common Sense did private label work for. But that was probably about 2 months after we left that he finally got that job.
And do you feel like you missed out on 14 years of your life in some ways?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what are your kids now? Your kids are older now. Did they go to college? Did they adjust to having normal lives?
Yeah, they did adjust. Emmett is now 26 and he has 3 little girls of his own.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and my 2 daughters are, my older one is going into her 3rd year of dental hygiene school, and my younger daughter is just starting this year in the same program. And then my youngest son is going into his senior year of high school.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I'm so happy for you that you were able to get back the life that you wanted. You know, how do you feel about religion today after being a part of that? Do you have? I'm assuming you don't believe in the 12 tribes religion, but how do you feel about religion overall?
That's a hard one for me. I've been invited to church, through friends. And like I said, my in-laws left and they now go to a church in town. And I'm friends with people there, but I've never been comfortable enough to go.
Yeah.
I still believe in God, like a higher power, karma, good energy, like that type of thing. But I haven't really gone down the path of, looking into another religion, and my children, none of them want anything to do with religion, with the Bible, with any of the stuff that they grew up with.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's totally understandable. And so, like I said at the beginning of the interview, I saw your videos on TikTok, and I immediately like love just how you're kind of explaining in small segments of what you did. So you wrote a book. It's the name of the book is called All Who Believe: A Memoir in the Life of 12 Tribes. And so tell me just how has that book been perceived by people? Have you been reached out to by people that have been in other cults or that
Oh
have
yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like that you're doing a great thing being going on TikTok and it's almost like you're probably giving people, um, not support, but you're kinda giving them hope if they are in a cult or people that are out, they're like, "Oh, I wasn't alone. I'm not the only person that went through this." So I feel like it's really amazing that you're doing these videos and that you wrote this book for people, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it helped me to process my experience for
Yeah.
sure. That's what the book started out as. I didn't just start writing a book. I just started writing down things that I remembered just as a way to process, like journaling almost. And it just kind of organically became a book over time as I like added in more things and remembered more things. And then it's been really nice. I don't know how much help I am to people that are in groups because most of the people in these groups don't have access to
Yeah.
stuff like TikTok, or my book even.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I have been in contact with a lot of people who have family members in groups and asking me, like, what do I do? Like, how do I help them? I've had people be like, oh my God, I live next door to the 12 tribes, like, what can I do to, like, let these women know that I'll help them if they need it?
Mhm.
Things like that. I've met so many people that have also been involved in different groups in their lives, and it's so neat to share stories and see how these groups all have such similar ways of attracting people
Mhm.
and then keeping people there out of
Yep.
fear and guilt. Like there's just so much commonality, even if the premise of the group is so different, just the tactics and the lingo, and it's just amazing how much similarities there are and how many groups there are. There are so many.
Yeah. I mean, I just whenever I'm interested in cults, and I've had a couple other people on, and it seemed very similar, the stories. Some of them
Uh-huh.
are more abusive, though. Some of
Yep.
them are I interviewed this woman named, John Key, and she was in a cult called the Moonies,
Uh-huh. Yep, I've heard of
and
that.
she is such a better person now that she's out, and, she's such a survivor, and at one point, she didn't even wanna live anymore. She was thinking about committing suicide because she was
Yeah.
so miserable, and, I just think people like her and you that are doing this for people, it's just like it's not that people necessarily are in the cult, like you said, they can't see your videos and read your book, but people that get out
Yep.
and just feel like they hear your story and they understand it. I mean, when the people that hear this interview are gonna see that you're such a survivor and, like, look what you've done and look what your kids are doing now.
Yep.
They're in college, I mean, it's amazing. Your son has 3 I mean, you've completely changed their life by getting them out of the cult at those ages, so,
Mhm. Yep. Yep. And I did go through a time that I was really depressed and probably the closest to suicidal that I'd ever been,
yeah.
because I just started thinking, like, what is wrong with me? Like, why don't I get it? Why don't I have this unshakable faith? Why aren't I so happy and so content with the with this life here? And I would have thoughts of, if I'm in a, maybe if I just drive somewhere and I'm by myself and nobody else was going to get hurt, if I got in an accident, like maybe like I'm not the kind of mother that my children need to lead them to the kingdom, so they'd probably be better off, like, with somebody else. And I had all those thoughts.
But thank God you didn't because you're such a good mom for all the stuff that you did for them, and they wouldn't have you today, so it's so great that you're still here and you didn't do that, so and how's your husband today? Is he good and happy now, living a normal life?
Yeah, he's back in his element of computer
Yeah.
computer stuff again and
Yeah.
developing software. Yes, I mean he works from home. My son plays baseball and he's been able to be involved in a lot of like coaching, and he coaches the volleyball team. So he's like a sports guy. So like he's, back in his realm of athletics. Yeah.
That's amazing. You are such an awesome person. You're such a survivor, and I love that you are telling your story. So keep doing it,
Thank you.
and I will. I'll put a link to the book on Amazon. So if people want to buy it, again, the name of the book is "All Who Believe: A Memoir in the Life of the 12 Tribes." So I'm ordering it today, and I'm looking forward to reading it and kind of getting into more of the details. And you're on what's your TikTok name? I have it in my email, but that way people can, and I'll put your TikTok in the description too. But what is it? Just you can tell people what your TikTok name is.
It's at Tamara Mathieu. Oh, sorry.
Yep, at Tamara. Yeah, I'll put that in
Okay,
there.
it's relatively new, so
Yeah, and we'll get you some followers on there so people
thank
can
you.
know and listen to your stories because again, I think it's great. You caught my attention right away.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it. I, again, happy that you got out and that you're living a fantastic life now. And everyone, please be sure to leave a comment and let us know what you think about the interview with Tamara, and be sure to subscribe. And thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.